Could all participants please mute yourselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If you wish to speak, then can you please put your hand up if you can be seen on screen, or use the yellow raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when addressing the committee, then let the chair or Democratic Officer know. If you have a webcam, then try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so you can at least hear or be heard. So welcome back everyone to the committee. I hope you had a restful August and you're ready to get stuck into the committee again. So first of all, I want to welcome Jamie and Theo from the Vale Youth Council who are joining us on the committee for the first time tonight. So I hope you enjoy the committee and take a full and active role. So moving to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I've had a few. So Rebecca Morteo, Councillor Payne, Councillor Godfrey and Councillor Asbury. So I don't know if there are any other apologies.
Chair, I have had no other apologies, and I can see that Councillor Hennessy has joined us now, who thought he might be a few minutes late. Can I just mention, Chair, that unfortunately your audio is going in and out, so I'm just wondering, you know, what's happening with your connection?
Take my headphones off. Maybe is that any better?
It was then, but whether it'll continue, because your picture is pixelating, but as long as I can hear you, that would be the main thing tonight, because we have seen you on screen.
I'll take my own advice and turn the camera off, and hopefully you can hear me. Is that okay?
Yeah, we have seen you, Chair. So, but if you could come in and out just to make sure that during the meeting, the viewers then at home can see that the chair is present, that would be great. Thank you.
No problems. So we haven't got any other apologies?
No, those are the 4 apologies that I've had as well. Thank you, Chair. Because you've mentioned Councillor Godfrey. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So moving to agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on 15th of June and 13th of July. If anyone's got any thoughts or observations on those. If not, I'll move
happy to second the minutes,
approve
Chair.
it. Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests. Martin.
I have a declaration of interest for item 6, which is about the rebuilding of St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School. I'm a foundation governor of St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School, so I have a personal and prejudicial interest. And I'll leave the meeting when we get to that point.
Great. Thank you for that, Martin. So if there are no others, we'll move on to agenda item 4, Financial Strategy 24-25, which is a reference from Cabinet, and it's over to Gemma Jones.
Hi, good evening. Thank you ever so much for having me. I've just got a few slides to take us through this report. It's very much a scene-setting report at this stage that will kick off the budget setting process for 24-25 and setting the medium-term financial plan. So some of the main issues that we need to cover within the report are around what our overall strategy is, what the economic outlook is that we're operating within, and what our current 5-year position is, and then an approach in terms of how we move forward. So we're proposing to adopt an approach that's broadly similar to 23-24, but with more of a focus on establishing a sustainable plan over 5 years. But obviously that would be in part dependent by the nature of the cost pressures and funding that emerges through the process. Continuing to focus on delivering the corporate plan and supporting the most vulnerable, with a focus on generating local tax revenue, fees and charges, and ensuring that we have collective responsibility for delivering a balanced budget. In terms of the economic situation that we're operating with, as you'll all be aware, inflation continues to be high, which obviously affects our communities, our employees, and also the cost of delivering services. And the Bank of England base rate is risen and continues to be high also. Just moving on to the next slide. So in terms of our 5-year projections, we're projecting an increase in government funding across the period, and also are proposing to increase council tax. Cost pressures at summary level are included on this slide, but obviously specifically to this committee, that includes cost pressures such as demographic increases for pupils in both mainstream and special schools, and also cost pressures around things like the fallout of out of county income and the cost of placements across that period. So we're currently projecting a gap of 6.4 million in 24-25, and then there are smaller gaps across the period. But what we always find is the closer we get to a financial year, the more cost pressures emerge because we have more accurate information. And I think certainly we know already that the pay pressures that we had included as indicative figures need to increase. And we're currently reviewing, and we're asking directorates to submit revised cost pressures that will feed into the report that comes back in November, that gives us perhaps a slightly clearer picture of what the cost pressure position for the council is. In terms of how we close any gap that emerges, obviously it's really important that we have a lot of challenge around those cost pressures, but also we'll need to consider savings as part of that picture. We're really hoping that by kicking off this process early, we can identify potential transformation themes, and they're highlighted on this slide. So looking particularly at things around service transformation, really trying to use digital innovation, and looking at alternative and target operating models. And we do have some reserve set aside for investment and reshaping as a council that we could potentially utilise as part of those proposals. But of course, we'd also be looking at other savings, and I think in the report they're called tactical savings, and those are some of the ones that we utilised as part of our balancing the budget process last year. So in terms of the process from here, the proposal is that we would bring a report back in November after we've done some more work to refine and review the cost pressures. We're thinking that we'll get a settlement around December time, and then bring back an indicative report in January for consultation, which will set us up then to bring the final proposals in March. Those are the key points I was going to pull out, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the report.
Thanks, Gemma. Over to councillors if there are any questions or comments. Nothing that I can see. Yeah, I just wanted to ask Gemma about placements. I don't know if you have any sort of info to hand about the number of placements sort of incoming and outgoing from the Vale of Glamorgan. I was just interested in the number of kids from outside the Vale being placed in Vale schools.
Apologies, councillor, because I think you have asked this question previously, and I haven't supplied the information. So I have just chased up the request. I think at the point I asked it over the summer, quite a lot of people were on leave, so I've just chased up the request to try and get the breakdown of information, because there were some discussions about doing the calculation. So I will get that and circulate it ASAP. Apologies.
That's all right. No worries. Thank you, Gemma.
Okay.
Any other questions from councillors for Gemma?
All good. Thank you, Gemma.
Thanks, Naomi. Doesn't look like it. So thank you for that, Gemma. If there are no other comments, I propose we note the financial strategy, if someone would like to second that.
Happy to second.
Diolch yn fawr. We'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the draft capital strategy 24-25 and initial capital programme proposals 24-25 to 28-29. Over to you, Victoria.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to share some slides as well. Bear with me. Okay, can everybody see those?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so the report sets out the council's proposed draft capital strategy for 24-25, and you can see that in full in Appendix 1. And it also sets out the draft capital programme over the next 5 years, and that's detailed in Appendix 2. So the capital strategy looks at the longer term view of the council's capital investment requirements, and it identifies priority areas for capital investments and details the external factors that result in the need to incur capital expenditure. So in the final settlement for 23-24, Welsh Government did let us know that the general capital funding for 24-25 is going to remain at the same level for this year. So we know that we'll be getting 6.9 million of general capital funding. However, beyond that point, we don't know what the level of general capital funding will be. So as you can imagine, it's really difficult to predict future capital resources that are available to us. And as well as general capital funding, we're not aware of other specific grants we might be getting or capital receipts. And obviously the current economic climate makes that really challenging as well. So the next slide details the 5-year capital programme, and you can see that split over directorate. But in relation to learning and skills, the main things that are included in that are the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme and also some asset renewal budget for school buildings. There is also 2 schemes down in the pipeline section in relation to this scrutiny committee, and that's St Richard Gwyn and Ysgol Iolin Morgannwg, and they will remain pipeline schemes until full business cases are approved. So here you can see the funding of the capital programme set out over the 5 years, and you can see our general capital grant assumptions and draw down from reserves and revenue, and it also details the use of capital receipts, grants and section 106. And then in this bottom section, we've got the council's borrowing requirement, and any unsupported borrowing that is in the capital programme will have an implication on the council's revenue budget. So in terms of next steps, obviously this is a scene setting report, and at the moment we have asked officers to submit any capital bids that they may have for the future financial years. So it's a slight change since the report went in July. I think we said we were asking for capital bids back by September, but that's now changed to October. And then capital bids will be evaluated by Strategic Insight Board in November, and then we'll bring revised capital proposals to Cabinet and Scrutiny in January for comment and consultation. So that's the main points of that report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Victoria. Over to councillors, if there are any questions or thoughts. No, that's okay. Thanks for that, Victoria, and
no problem.
We'll look forward to the revised proposals in January.
Yeah, great, thank you.
If there are no, thanks. If there are no thoughts or comments, again, I move to note the draft capital strategy and initial capital and programme proposals. So if I could have a seconder for that.
Happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Agenda item 6. The consultation on proposal to deliver a new building for St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School. And before I get to you, Lisa, I know Martin might have to leave us at this point.
He's just left, Chair. He's just left.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Over to you, Lisa.
Good evening, everybody. This report has been referred to scrutiny by Cabinet in order to advise that the governing body at St Richard Gwyn Catholic High School and the Archdiocese of Cardiff has authorised the Director of Learning and Skills to undertake a consultation on their behalf. The consultation runs from the 5th of September to the 17th of October this year. The consultation is in relation to the proposed creation of a new school building with an increased capacity, which will be available from September 2025. The full consultation document can be found as an appendix to the Cabinet report and is available on the Council's website, but I will summarise it briefly for you. In summary, the proposal is to create a new school building on the existing site for St Richard Gwyn at the southwest corner of the school grounds, thus allowing the existing school to remain operational during construction. Obviously, the council have a duty to ensure that the current school can run effectively during the construction period, and we do have significant experience of doing this on a number of other sites. The proposal also seeks to increase the capacity of St Richard Gwyn from 813 places to 1,050 places. This would equate to 210 pupils in each year group. The The current school building has a capacity of 813 places, but already has 833 pupils on roll. Demand for school places at St Richard Gwyn is above the current capacity, and there is therefore no space to accommodate additional pupils. In addition to the above, the establishment of a specialist resource space for 60 pupils would also be developed as part of this project to provide additional support to a range of pupils with individual learning plans and differing needs. The proposal would also address the condition and suitability issues within the existing buildings. Elements of the school were categorised as being in poor condition following a recent review. This project would ensure that the new building would meet modern building standards, reduce running costs, and would also be net zero carbon in operation. The project is included in the Council's School Investment Programme, funded by Welsh Government's Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, and the estimated total build would be just over 62 million. This funding is included in the Sustainable Communities for Learning Outline programme that has been approved by Cabinet. For information, no changes to St Richard Gwyn's catchment area or admissions policy are proposed as part of this consultation. The current school has experienced some major flooding of the site over the past few years due to poor drainage. The council has worked closely with the Natural Resources Wales to implement improvements for drainage before the redevelopment of the site takes place. Council officers are also supporting the school's governing body with the consultation process, and community staff, pupil and parent meetings have been arranged to allow stakeholders to find out more about the proposal. Feedback received through the consultation period will be presented to Cabinet for reference, and the governing body and Archdiocese will be provided with a report to inform their decision. That ends my summary of the report, but with your permission, Chair, I'd be pleased to respond to any questions.
Absolutely, thank you, Lisa. So over to councillors for any questions or comments. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for that. It's really amazing news. Like, we've got a new school in Whitmore and Pencoitry. Really pleased that St Richard Gwyn are getting a new school, and amazing that they can stay on site as well while it's being rebuilt. So thank you very much, and thanks for the hard work.
Thank you.
Any other councillors? I don't have Councillor Birch. Sorry, so you pop up. I don't know if you want to comment.
Thank you. Well, yes, I mean, I'd like to commend this plan to the councillors. I think it's a very welcome move. Obviously we're building 21st century schools, and it's overcrowded at present. I was there quite recently, and it will be very gratifying to see a completely new facility built for the expanding numbers of people wanting it. So I would commend it to the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Any other comments or thoughts from councillors? No. Yeah, I just like to associate myself with what Naomi and Rhiannon said. I think it's great for the school, and good that the blood risk is being sorted out as well. I think that's vitally important. So definitely welcome all of that. So if that can be, those comments can be included in the consultation, that the committee certainly welcomes this. And then great. So if there are no other comments, if I could have a seconder to note the consultation.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor. Good job. Moving on to agenda item 7. Thank you, Lisa. Agenda item 7.
Chair, I'm requesting that. Sorry to interrupt you. I'm requesting that Dr. Price joins us.
Absolutely.
I'm waiting. If you don't mind waiting to see if he comes in.
Yeah, that's no problem.
And I'll let you know. Dr. Price, can I confirm that you are present, because it looks like you are?
Yes, I'm back.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks,
Welcome
Chair.
back, Martin. Agenda item 7, the Vale Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment 22-23, and it's over to Trevor.
Thanks, folks. Tom sends his apologies. He's not able to come tonight, so I'm going to do my best to cover the report. So this report on the Council's annual self-assessment is making the rounds to all the scrutiny committees, the governance and audit committees, and a number of public consultations. to get some feedback before being finalised and being sent back to Cabinet for consideration. The self-assessment itself stems from the Local Government and Elections Act, which basically says as a council we need to keep our performance under review through self-assessment, which is why we have this process in place. The assessment itself is appended at Appendix A. I think it's about 150 pages, and it basically looks at the council's performance over the past year and how it's done in delivering its annual delivery plan priorities and how that aligns to the corporate plan and wellbeing objectives. It takes into account a number of different sources of information to come to the conclusions it's reached. So that includes things like quarterly and annual performance and risk assessment, internal audit and risk programs, the annual governance statements that we get from our regulators, self-assessments that we do at directorate levels, including some of the peer assessments that we do. So we will have directors from one directorate who will challenge the self-assessment for another and be a bit of a critical friend and offer some challenge in that sense. The intention then of the report is to present a balanced picture, taking all these different things into account in terms of the performance in the last year. In the covering report itself, it makes reference to how it's structured, and some of that's been based on the feedback that has come from members to date. Some of the things that have been taken into account from feedback are things like having more details in some of the sections around the types of engagement that's been done and the types of consultation exercise that have been done during the year. So there's more of a focus and detail around that, which is useful. Members have also asked previously for things like an overview of the findings around public opinion surveys and the complaints and compliments process to make sure those are more visible and taken into account. So that's going to be included in the report as well. Some of the work around that consultation is happening this month, so that will be included once the final stuff is done. The covering report goes on to give the assessment. So at the moment, the current judgment for the council from its self-assessment is good. That's based on an achievement of about 85% of all of the in-year activities and performance targets that were set in the ADP. The report also goes on to talk about the management of its resources, which is given a rating of good. What I would say from an education perspective, and you would expect me to say this from an education perspective, that doesn't mean we have enough money. That just means that the money that we have is used and scrutinised and challenged effectively, both within directorates and schools as well. There's a programme of engagement activity that's scheduled for September that I think I mentioned. That's going to look at local businesses, community involvement, council staff, and all this is going to be done through the public opinion survey and some workshops that are being done with the PSB, the Public Services Board partners. And the draft report is also being circulated for comment on that. I think there was also an informal briefing that was given to members as well over this, or just before the summer break in July. So the bits I mentioned earlier about some of the feedback, that's where that's come from. In the report, there's a timescale. I think it's paragraph 219. So that talks about what's going to be happening basically between the 7th September and March 2024 when the final version is sent forward. So that's it in a nutshell. The self-assessment itself is far-reaching. So I guess the ask today is if there are any comments that councillors wish to be included as part of this process. Now's your chance. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Trevor. So if councillor have any questions. Can't see any hands yet, but I've just got one, Trevor. There was line, and there's been obviously school attendance is a huge issue across the whole country, and it talked about the declining 3-year trends in attendance, and obviously that there's a lot of stakeholders doing a lot to tackle that. I was just wondering about the long-term impacts of COVID and the lockdowns on children. Children sort of coming into the education system, or children who haven't returned, and things of that nature.
Would you like me to come in there?
Corwin's the expert, yeah.
Saved by the bell. Apologies for being late, everybody. I hightailed it back from Cardigan. So I suspect that you will all have seen the banners and the posters and everything else for our new attendance campaign that are splattered around the Vale. They're on a roundabouts, they're in doctor surgeries, they're in bus stops, they're everywhere they possibly can be. But you're absolutely right, Chair, that the impact of COVID, we have seen increasing numbers of children and young people who are finding it difficult to return to school. The percentage of children with persistent absence, that is absence below 80%, has increased, and in many cases is worryingly low, that absence, as a result of, in many cases, anxiety, social, emotional, mental health problems too. So there are many challenges. Now, we will be bringing a report to next month's scrutiny on attendance and exclusions. So you will have more detail about that. What I will say, though, is that at about Easter of last academic year, we were ranked approximately 14th, I think it was, out of the 22 local authorities across Wales for our attendance figures. I'm not saying it's all down to the campaign, but there's lots of different strands of work that we've been doing as a team, some of which is actually getting schools to accurately record attendance. And at the end of the academic year, overall, we were 6th in the country. And that was, the percentages, as you can imagine, are so tight. The highest was 90%, and we were 6th with 89%. So it was a big improvement during the course of the year, which we were pleased with, but still not enough. And we don't want to be at 89%. We do want to improve further. We want to be the best we possibly can be, and we certainly want to be above 90%. Ideally, we want to be 92, 93, if not higher. Is there anything more you want me to answer on that, Chair, or do you want to wait until the report that comes through next month?
Yeah, I can wait for the report. I guess there'll be lots of detail in there. I'll probably answer all my questions, but yeah. Something to look forward to next month. Thank you, Morwen.
Okay, thanks.
Cheers. Are there any other thoughts, queries, opinions from councillors? No? Okay. Thank you, Trevor and Morwen, for the input. So if there's no other thoughts or comments in that case, I move we note the draft Vale Glamorgan annual self-assessment. If I could have a seconder for that.
Happy to note.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Next agenda item 8, annual corporate safeguarding report 22-23, and it's over to Jason Redrutt.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I just obviously take you highlight through the report, obviously the learning and skills section of the annual interim 6-monthly report for the annual report for the local authority. Some of the main highlights there, obviously, as the directorate, we do continue to evolve in a very positive way in line with our national requirements in both legislation and guidance and policy. We'll talk about safer recruitment, Chair. Since last September, month on month, within Learning and Skills Directorate and schools, we've maintained 100% compliance rate with safe recruitment, apart from one breach in April 2023, which was obviously addressed robustly as well, and that continues in the same vein. When it comes to actually referrals under Section 5 of the Wales Safeguarding Procedures, so allegations of professional concerns against teachers and other professionals in education, there was 20 made during 21-22, but during the 22-23 period, the same period, 35 referrals. So, a significant increase. We're not running out of kilter with the rest of the country, and there's been a rise across both England and Wales in the number of recordings of allegations of professional concern, which I would recommend that we see as a positive, Chair, in that schools in Wales, so the schools are using the process, that there's confidence in the process, and these allegations are being taken seriously, and both pupils and staff are being protected. So that's really important. When it comes to our training in the Vale, safeguarding training, obviously nationally, the recommendation is on a 3-yearly basis for refresher of safeguarding training. We in the Vale consider the importance that such that we carry on an annual basis. At this time, in our schools, at the time of the report, in the schools that our DSPs, so our designated safeguarding persons, 53 out of 54 were in compliance. Really, so almost perfect compliance rate. Deputy DSPs, which obviously a lot of places have more than one, an 88% compliance rate, and in our directorate, all of our DSPs were in compliance. That 100% compliance rate, obviously, it shows the importance people see in the safeguarding training. Along with that training, we also obviously offer training in conjunction with governor support for our designated safeguarding governors. And again, this is something we rolled out during this last academic year, and we've managed to train 49 out of the 54 designated safeguarding governors. And those who haven't been trained will be taking that training in the autumn term now, and have been contacted. So that's good. And we made a decision that all our governors, all our school governors, are given the access and opportunity to access the e-learning on Hub, which gives an introduction to safeguarding training there for all governors, and that will be monitored and kept up daily by compliance by schools. So all very positive. Other activities continue in the training. Sort of steer in the education. We're taking a big part in the local authority drive to train all our staff in contact with the public in the violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence training, and we're delivering that face to face to all our schools, and that is progressing at a good speed as well, Chair. And finally, just with the it says obviously recent, is well over a year now, year and a half ago, the ESTIM, we don't tell our teachers, thematic review into peer-on-peer sexual harassment. We do still wait for the Welsh Government action plan from this, and there was an interim plan, but the actual publication of the full plan has been delayed. But we continue to forge forward as an authority, as a directorate, in trying to improve our data collection around bullying and prejudice incidents, and ensuring there's professional learning for staff as well, to try and improve their confidence in challenging this type of harmful behaviour. Along with this, say that secondary schools wellbeing panel, where such topics as bullying and any use of any type of phobic behaviour in school settings is discussed. So that's my report, Chair, on the interim corporate safeguarding report for learning skills.
Thanks very much, Jason. So over to councillors if there are any questions for Jason. Doesn't look like a Jason today, but thank you. Oh, sorry, we've got one. Councillor Goodjohn.
I just say thank you very much for the report. I think it's great, and I think it's fantastic that you're recording anything to do with bullying and looking at the child's well-being. I think that can only help attendance as well in the future, that things are being recorded and discussed, and things, incidents are being addressed. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I can't see any other hands up, so thank you for the presentation, Jason. Much appreciated. And the move we note the agenda item 8, the annual corporate safeguarding reports. If I could have a seconder for noting that. Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 9, report from Director of Learning and Skills, Q1 Revenue Monitoring 23-24. So it's over to Victoria Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share the slides again. Okay, so yeah, this is the revenue monitoring for Q1. So it's really early on in the financial year. And this slide here provides the overall revenue projected position for 23-24. So obviously this is split over directorate, but I'll go into learning and skills in a bit more detail further on in the presentation. So the key headlines for the whole council is that there's significant emerging pressures in social services with increased costs of care packages, ongoing pressures for neighbourhood services with potholes and patchings, and staffing budgets including market forces payments, and also emerging pressures in place in respect of income and the shortfall against savings. So here you can see the savings for 23-24 for the council over directorate, and it shows the target and the amount achieved or expected to be achieved in year. And as you can see, learning and skills is falling short of the target slightly. So the budget assumed 2.75 million of efficiencies for schools and 564k corporately. So there is some shortfall in savings, like I said, due to timing around implementation. And in the first instance, the shortfall would need to be funded from reserves. So the learning and skills budget was set at 130.7 million for 23-24, and that included the use of reserves of 1.2 million to support school budgets. We're currently assuming a break-even position, but that is after a drawdown of a significant amount of reserves of approximately 10 million. And that includes 6.5 million ring fence for schools. And there's further information detailed on that in Appendix A of the report. So the key pressures for learning and skills are the early retirement and voluntary retirement budget, the out-of-county income. So there's a reduction in out-of-county income for pupils from other local authorities attending special schools and resource bases. The children's placement budget. So there's an increased number of placements and also an increased cost of these placements. There's an establishment of the new Welsh Medium resource base being set up at Gwynant from September, and the existing provision at Whitmore resource base and Havant resource base is being increased. And also as part of the efficiency savings for the directorate, the arts service was set an income target of 65k, and there's a projected shortfall in year. So in relation to schools, as I said, there's an assumed 6.5 million drawdown of reserves in year. And schools have submitted 3-year budgets in line with the statutory deadline. There are 21 schools that have submitted a deficit budget for 23-24, and these deficits are estimated at 2.7 million. So the regulations require that schools that find themselves in this position submit a balanced recovery plan showing how they're going to eradicate that deficit over the next few years. And so currently only 2 of the schools in a deficit position have provided a balanced recovery plan. The other 19 schools have submitted non-recoverable budget deficits. So schools are being challenged where appropriate, and work is ongoing to support the schools in reducing these deficits where possible. So this table shows the council's use of reserves over the whole council. You can see the balance as at the 1st of April 23, and then what the estimated balance is going to be at the 31st of March 2024. So as you can see, we're going to projecting to use a significant amount of reserves in year, and that's obviously, as we just discussed, to fund the revenue pressures, but also it'll be used to fund the capital programme as well. And that's all for that report. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Victoria. So over to councillors. I can't see any hands up just yet. I've got a couple of queries. I was wondering if they would be, you probably don't have them just to hand, but if there are any figures anywhere in the reduction for out-of-county income for ALM placements is something I asked a little bit earlier. I don't know if those figures would exist anywhere, and if they could be provided, I'd just be interested to see sort of the decline in ALM children coming into the Vale from outside, if that's available at all.
Yeah, I don't have those figures to hand, Chair, but I can ask the question and get that information for you.
Lovely.
Certainly.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And another thing, you mentioned the assistance given to schools in producing recovery plans. So I know obviously all schools won't necessarily have the expertise to deal with things like that. So just wondered if you'd be able to elaborate on what the council's doing to help them.
Yeah, no problem. So obviously schools have their own finance teams within the schools, but also the central education department has finance officers that specifically go out to the schools and help them with that process. Jem, do you want to elaborate anything on that?
I think, Chair, if you don't mind, I think Trevor is going to give you a bit more of a better answer than I can, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, those aren't pretty figures. And while I would expect from the conversations I've had to date, the number of school balances will go down, they're certainly not going to go down to zero. Schools have had a heck of a lot of support, both from the education and the corporate finance team in working with their budgets. And we've also teamed up with ex-head teachers and ex-executive heads who have a history of very good financial management, who have gone out to work with individual schools on their budgets. Schools, if they aren't able to balance their budgets and deliver a recovery plan, they are still submitting to us a business case in terms of why that isn't possible, or what the impact would be if they were to make the cuts required. And in some cases, it's a case of, well, we would have to stop teaching some of the classes, which obviously isn't going to be the case. So going forward, we need to continue working with the schools. I'm having conversations with them. My officers are having conversations with them. Other teachers in our local authority, neighbouring local authorities are having conversations with them to try and mitigate that as best that we can. But there's no amount of advice that will solve all of those problems, if I'm being really honest with you. So we just need to bear that in mind.
Thanks for that, Trevor and Victoria. See Martin Price.
I'm going to ask Trevor what the consequences are for schools which don't have a balanced budget, 3-year plan for the purposes. I mean, does that mean that the Vale will continue to have to bail them out effectively, or I mean, is there a sanction against them because they can't balance the books?
So what the legislation says, and it's the same for the council, is you're not allowed to have an unlicensed deficit. That's the first thing. What the law also says is if you have a school that is unable to do a recovery plan, then the council can take or should take the budget off of that school to manage it for them. Again, being honest with you, if there were concerns over financial mismanagement or concerns in schools, then that of course would be appropriate. However, with the schools as they are now, we are working with them, and I certainly don't feel that taking a budget off of a school again would fix those problems. Also conscious of the finite support that we have with a very limited number of officers in the council to take on this additional work, and that just isn't practical. Plus the expertise lives in the school. So while we aren't able as a local authority to sanction an unlicensed deficit, what we can do is monitor these deficits and work with schools up to a period of 5 years in terms of what they're able to do. So the short answer is we don't have a turnkey solution to resolve that, nor would I be in a position or want to be in a position to remove schools' budgets unless they give me cause. And they haven't given me cause. They've been working their tails off in trying to resolve things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor and Martin. I don't see any other hands up just yet. So thank you for that, Victoria. Well, you're back for the next one.
Yeah.
So just in the meantime, if I could have a seconder to note the Q1 revenue monitoring report.
I'll second.
Thanks, Councillor Hennessy. Agenda item 10, capital monitoring for the period 1st of April to 31st of May. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you. Bear with me while I just share the slides. Okay, yeah, so again, we're covering the period Q1, so quite early on in the financial year. So obviously there's still many areas that are continuing to experience increasing costs across capital schemes with increased costs in construction and materials and labour. Officers are reporting the requirement to renegotiate submitted tenders to bring schemes back within budget. But we are closely monitoring the schemes in year and identifying any overspends or slippages that will be reported to you in future monitoring reports. So here you can see the capital programme summary. So it's detailed over directorate and it starts with the approved programme as it was approved in March, and then details the changes and amendments throughout the financial year, so any additions and slippages, and then we get to the total capital programme. And as at the time of writing this report, the programme was at 125.8 million. Now, that's quite a large, significant programme for the Vale of Glamorgan Council. So we are going to be anticipating some slippage being brought to you in future monitoring reports. So the next slide then details the spend to date over the directorate. And as I said, it details the approved programme of 125.8 million. And with the request within the report, that then amends the forecast outturn to 126 million. So as you can see at the moment for learning and skills, the spend is at 2.2 million. So obviously with schools, the majority of capital works takes place in the summer holidays. So I would think that would considerably increase in the next monitoring report that will be brought to yourselves. So in relation to schemes under the remit of this scrutiny committee, at the time of writing, the approved programme was 34.7 million. And if the requests within the report to amend the capital programme are approved, the revised forecast outturn is projected to be 34.76 million. And as I said, spend to the end of June is 2.2 million. So there are 5 requests within the report under the remit of this scrutiny committee for changes. So first of all, to combine some schemes in relation to St Athan roof renewal budget. So I think there was a couple of schemes on the capital programme of different phases of this scheme, and for procurement reasons it's easier to combine them into one scheme. And then in similar to the Victorian schools budget here, just requesting to combine some budgets, and again for the High Street primary roof scheme budgets, there was a couple of phases of budgets there. So there was also an increase in additional learning needs budget by 14k to cover the final cost for equipment and installation works at Ysgol Gwaun and Nant. And also we have a grant on the capital programme for early years childcare, and Welsh Government have given us an additional 39k for project management costs to manage that scheme. And then there's also 2 delegated authorities that have been approved on the capital programme, and that's to include a new scheme budget for 500k for a replacement classroom, a modular building at Dennis Powys Junior School, and that's going to be funded by Section 106 monies. And then also a virement from the Education Asset Renewal Contingency budget of 37k to increase the scheme budget for St Curig flat roof repairs following the requirement for further works. So that summarises the capital monitoring report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Victoria. Councillors, any questions? No hands, Victoria.
Lovely, thank you.
Very comprehensive. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Great, so that was agenda item 10. So if I could have a seconder for noting the capital monitoring report, including the noting the use of delegated authority and emergency powers. If I could have a seconder for that, please.
Happy to do that.
Thank you both. Agenda item 11, annual delivery plan monitoring report quarter Q1 performance. Over to you, Morwen.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be running through the whole report because, as you know, it's very lengthy and the appendices are too. So I'm just going to be making reference to Appendix 1, which you have within your pack, and just highlight a few areas that I think are worthy of noting. And both Trevor and Liz are here as well, obviously, on the call. If there's anything pertaining to their areas that you have any questions, then we will do our best between the 3 of us. So the overall RAG status is green, as you can see, but where it is red, it is largely because the actions haven't actually started as yet. It is just Q1. Obviously, that would be a worry if we were in Q4, but we're not concerned the fact that this is Q1 because it is down to the timing and the planning of it. If I look at what we have achieved, and I will just highlight a couple of different aspects. So within Objective 1, working with and for our communities, over the summer holidays, there was a full programme of events for children across the Vale. It was very well attended. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head in case anybody asks, but it's great that we've got these free events that children are able to access during the holidays, and obviously they're able to play and learn with their peers and maintain that well-being, which I know is so important, and which some parents might struggle with during 6 weeks. Trevor has talked at length about the school buildings, the new buildings, and it's great the Cabinet have now approved to go ahead with a new building at Ysgol Glamorgan. There's an adult community space there. If you haven't been to Ysgol Glamorgan, it is a very old Victorian building and it is in desperate need of updating. And I think that a brand new building will certainly be very, very well welcomed by the school and the community. Learning Welsh is a priority for the Welsh Government as well as us as a local authority. And there were 59 learners who enrolled onto the Work in Welsh course. I was one of them. The target was 50. So it's great that more people are now looking to participate and take part and learn. Don't ask me though to speak Welsh because it is still in very early stages. If I go into Objective 2, which is supporting the learning, employment and sustainable economic growth, the Communities for Work programme and Communities for Work Plus have moved now, as they are now funded by SPF funding rather than EU funding, and it has been seamless. The target was 150 young people to be enrolled in the programme, and we actually exceeded that with 179, which is fantastic. And it bodes well for the future of the whole project. You will be aware of the Paul Dix project, which is led by Liz's team through Ysgol as well. And that is going very well. And schools have been engaging very positively. And as part of the brokered package, schools have had a health check with recommendations. So 48 schools have had that health check and 36 have now engaged with online training as well. And many have been in receipt of coaching, which is helping them address some of the areas of improvement that have been identified. Objective 3, supporting people at home and in their community. Trevor's team have done an incredible job of rolling out the universal primary free school meals. I don't believe that has happened across the whole of Wales, so it is fantastic that in the Vale that has happened really well. And the Food and Fun programme as well, which ran in schools across the summer period too. And I know that is very welcome, particularly in some of our communities where the cost of living crisis is having a particularly acute impact. The homelessness project, that is now within Strive, which is sitting within the pupil engagement team in the youth service. It is now part of the SPF funding, and that is also running very well, like the Communities for Work project. So very pleased with that. In Objective 4, respect, enhance and enjoy our environment. If you haven't been to South Point Primary School in Rhys, it is amazing. And you'll be aware it's the first school in Wales to have a net zero carbon footprint. So that is fantastic. It's been there for a year now, which I can't believe that year has passed so quickly. And following on from that, the expansion of Ysgol will be following along the similar sort of lines, but we'll have a green roof as well to add to the biodiversity status of the site too. So that is also great. It just seems as though all these new schools that come along, they're all great until the next one is built, which is even better. And let's look forward to the schools that are built 2 or 3 years from now, because they will be absolutely world class, undoubtedly. Children's art workshop from the Makerspace at Penarth Library has been selected for an international exhibition. And that is particularly pertinent, I think, to us within learning and skills, because you'll be aware that Phil Southard, who was the operational manager and lead there, very sadly passed away a few weeks ago, and he was certainly the driving force behind that. Performance snapshot. It is what it is, really. As I said previously, the measures in red, it's because they haven't yet been started, but I believe it paints a very positive picture and representation of the Directorate. So some of our areas for improvement, which relate to our service plans. Within Objective 1, we've got a new Vale Youth Council, which was agreed by Cabinet. This has been discussed here at this panel too, but it's still in its infancy. So there's a lot to be done. We're working hard to develop and embed participation across the council, and our lead for participation is in close contact with schools and across the council, actually, to get young people as engaged and as involved as possible in decision making. With Objective 2, as has already been pointed out by the Chair, attendance is a concern at both primary and secondary schools. So our new inclusion lead, who will be presenting the report next month, she took a post around, I think it was Easter or Whitsun, and she's been very busy and is shaking things up. Our previous lead was fantastic, but sometimes having to change, new personality, new ideas, is always great. So that is going very well, and I'm sure that if a year from now we will see improvements in our attendance across the Vale. If I move on to emerging areas of development and activity, in Objective 1, we are extending the engagement with communities on proposals for new school investment programmes into the Sustainable Communities programme, Communities for Learning programme, sorry, which sits within Trevor's area. And these buildings are being, they're just popping up very, very quickly and really are fantastic. If you haven't yet been to, as I've already mentioned, South Point, we've also got St Barrack down on Barry Island, which is fantastic, and also Derw Newydd at the top of Court Road as well. Sorry, Trevor, did you want to come in?
If you'll indulge me, I just want to brag about Derw Newydd, because it's the best provision you'll find in the whole country for this group of young people. They've opened their doors this week, and one of the children walking through the school with their parents when seeing it said, "I can't believe somebody spent 10 million quid on me." I think that says it all for this group of young people who traditionally were scattered at a couple of sites across the Vale and had little investment. So something we've all put together and we're particularly proud of. So thanks for that.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. Would you like Councillor Marshalsea to come in?
Yeah, sorry, go on, Councillor Marshalsea.
Sorry, Trevor, it'd be great to be taken on a little visit if possible. Sorry, I'm going to waste your time now.
We'll sort it out. It's worth a trip.
It might be a visit that there'll be others who wish to join as well, because it is worth showcasing, definitely. Okay, so back to the emerging areas. In Objective 2, we are looking to support post-16 education within the Vale. We had a review undertaken by the consortium, which was very positive actually, but we know there are areas for improvement that we need to develop, one of which is links with business. So we are working with one of the other directorates, which I can't remember off the top of my head, who will be supporting us in developing that. So that's a piece of work that's underway as well to look at that. We're looking to develop and further support the network of trauma-informed schools practitioners across the Vale. That is something that is within Liz's remit, and it's work that's doing extremely well. And our Alenkos are working with those most vulnerable learners in their schools too. Objective 3, we are continuing to address poverty through the targeting of grant funding to our schools and communities. Now that's from across the council, but for those who were able to come to Cadixton earlier this afternoon, they will have seen the impact of some of that grant funding and how it's supporting children and their families and the wider community as well, within not just Cadixton, but the whole Pencoitra cluster too. We're working towards the gold quality mark in the youth service. You may recall that we achieved the silver quality mark earlier this year. And we're not standing still. We want gold. Very few local authorities have it. Very few have actually got silver, but we want gold. We believe we deserve it. And that is something we're working towards. And hopefully in the new 2024, early in the year, we should be able to be in a position to be assessed for that. And finally, if I look on the emerging areas of concern, recruitment is still a concern for us. It is very difficult. I know that from within the youth service, which sits with me, I don't think we've had a full complement of staff since I've been in post, which is now 4 years. It is very difficult, but I know that is the case elsewhere too, and also in schools. Only this week I was talking to the head teacher of Cowbridge Comprehensive School, who would put adverts out and not had a single applicant. So it really is a challenge for schools. And as you can imagine, if Cowbridge has those challenges, that is replicated across the Vale and across the country actually, and Welsh medium will be particularly challenged when trying to recruit as well. We were disappointed that funding for the whole school approach by Welsh Government, that was not increased as we had expected. And in fact, it was reduced. So that has had a detrimental impact on our ability to extend a school counselling service, which, as you can imagine, is much needed. Young people do need it, and it's disappointing that we're in that position, but unfortunately that's out of our hands. And finally, another area of concern I would highlight is, again, relating to the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. The supply issues and the escalating costs of material are having an impact on the ability to deliver the projects that are within the Band B programme. And clearly that is difficult with those escalating costs then. Are there any questions anybody has for any of us?
Councillor Marshalsea.
Sorry, me again. Thank you for everything, Maureen. It all sounds really positive. Just a few questions I had. One was about attendance, which I'm looking forward to hearing the report next scrutiny. My other question was on library visits. Now, I know that you said some of these haven't necessarily started, and I did see that actually library visits seem to be up by 65% compared to last year. I was just wondering what you've put in place to try and increase families and people using the libraries in the Vale.
I'm going to ask Trevor to pick that one up.
The library service has changed quite a bit over the years. It's good to see people returning to our libraries, and some of the stuff that we introduced over COVID, for example. So things like we have a tablet loan scheme. So folks who might have, be digitally excluded could go in and can take an iPad out that has all of our library apps on there. We have a lot of systems and software that is now available remotely. So, things like if you're interested in genealogy, you can access all of that stuff for free from home through the library. We also have been running a lot of events in the library to draw people back in. It is really, really encouraging if you look at the breadth and depth of some of the stuff that we do, not just the rhyme and sign and the book clubs, but some more proactive groups. We have create things like creative writing. We have things like story time from people with all walks of life that have gone in, and those events are regularly full or pretty close to full, and that's at all of our library sites across the Vale. It is a tough time for libraries as well because they aren't immune from the savings. So things that you're seeing develop, Maureen mentioned the makerspace, for example. So we have one in Penarth, we have one in Barry. We have plans to expand that further. Not only does that give folks an opportunity to use new whizzy cool technologies in the community, but it also gives us a potential income stream. So, we've had folks, for example, who wanted to do laser etchings on coat hangers for weddings and those sorts of things. So there are costs and a little bit of profit to offset some of the savings targets in libraries. They're also really active on things like WhatsApp. So traditional book clubs where you might get people coming into the building, sat around talking, those are now on Facebook and on WhatsApp, which for different cohorts of people, I'm thinking, the 50+ group, for example, that's become really, really popular because they're still able to socialize and do those things through the library, but in a different sort of mechanism. So come and visit us in the libraries because there's lots going on and they're amazing staff in there.
I used to take my children regularly to all the Ryman signs, etc., and they were amazing. It was something we all looked forward to. I was just wondering, sorry, I hope that's okay to continue asking a question about this. You said about there's, I know there's lots of free events happening. Do people generally book into these events? And what sort of percentage of people turn up when they've booked for a free place?
Yeah, so one of the things we're trialing, and it depends on the type of year and the type of events. Sometimes we do bookings in advance because they're going to be really popular, and that's just to reserve places. Sometimes what we find is we will get bookings, but if it's sunny out, nobody shows up. Sometimes, depending on the usage, some of the events that we run in libraries, they're really great for childminding groups and those sorts of things. But plans change depending on the weather. So we're looking at what options can we do to make sure that, one, we're flexible with our booking systems to make sure that if there are cancellations, we can accommodate those, but to try and encourage people who do book for some of these things to come through with it sometimes. So there's a couple of different things that we're trying to do in libraries to make sure that the folks show up who say that they're going to show up. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks, Trevor. Naomi, Councillor Norman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Trevor. Just a quick question, actually, on the subject of libraries. Off the top of your head, and I know this is throwing it at you, can you tell me how many schools actually have a school library? And out of those school libraries, how many of them have a qualified school librarian? I only say that because I'm a retired school librarian myself. And it'd be interesting to know now, since the 15 years since I retired, how these are developed, over the Vale.
The models have changed a bit. I remember when I was in school, we had big dedicated libraries. We don't tend to have big dedicated libraries in the schools anymore. We have lots of things like reading nooks and those sorts of things. So if you walk through some of our primary schools, you'll see scattered around in different areas, cozy corners, book nooks, soft furnishings and stuff where the kids can go and be encouraged to read themselves. So we have lots of that. The partnership we have between our schools and our libraries is really good. So we have peripatetic librarians, for example, who do lots of engagement work with the schools. They will come and do talks with the kids. They will come and run sessions for them, or the kids in the year groups will be brought into the library, for example, or the Penarth Pier Pavilion facilitated by the library to run different events, which is great. And then depending on the school, Cogan comes to mind, for example, so they do a lot in terms of their reading clubs and their book awards and those sorts of things. And you'll find examples of that replicated throughout our schools. So it's a bit of a different model. It's a mixed model, but personally, I think it works really well because it gives schools flexibility. And when we're trying to accommodate different skills, different levels for the kids, there's more of an opportunity to engage in a style that's accustomed to them with the way that things are laid out in the schools at the moment.
Well, thank you, Trevor. I was thinking more of the reading for pleasure aspect rather than the educational aspect.
The other thing I would say to that is if you walk into any one of our schools, we have books plastered everywhere. There is tons of choice. Kids have books that they take home every week and they're reading books. Parents are given reading logs to encourage encourage that reading at home. Lots of schools will do reading days where mum and dad, grandpa, auntie, uncle, friend will come into the morning and just read with their kids or with other people's kids to generate and stimulate that kind of leisure reading. So yeah, there's lots of different opportunities to do that in and out of school.
Thank you for that.
Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Marshalsea.
Yeah, I was just responding to Jane's comment, to be honest, because my children attend the Newson Barrack, and one thing I was really impressed by while viewing as a parent is the little reading areas that they've got, because it used to be you'd have all your reading areas within the classroom, and we know how noisy classrooms can get, and actually the little reading nooks that are sort of on the main corridor are so well done, and there's lots of imagery that the school is sharing on Twitter, etc. And you can tell they're peaceful, calm spaces that really engage children that actually want to read rather than just the phonetic process. They're really engaging and enjoying reading. And it was really nice to see that in a Vale school. And the way that they're driving it,
Yeah, that's a really good example, because originally when that school was designed, those were cupboards. And Rian, the head teacher there, said, well, I don't want doors on that because they would make excellent reading nooks. So as part of the design process with the building, when the school was working with them, those doors went and they became finished rooms. And they've got like the surf area on one side and they've got a little library on the other side. And yeah, it is pretty cool.
She's right. They're great.
Thanks, Naomi. I can't see any of the hands up. I just had a quick one from me. One of the performance exceptions for the service plan action is about building on the linguistic skills of the division to support rollout of the next stage of the Welsh language strategy. I know Morwen is learning at the moment, which is great. I was just wondering, what's the measure of how is that progress measured, and what level of Welsh will people in the division need to support that rollout?
We're measuring it in terms of engagement and enrollments, and as Morwen said, we have a program we applied for funding for, the Work Welsh program. So we've exceeded those targets, which is really great. In terms of the standards of Welsh that you would expect, the figure off the top of my head is if you had intensive learning, it would take you 7 years to become perfectly fluent in Welsh or any other language. So that's not the sort of level that we're working for, but we're looking for enough, to greet and speak to individuals and make them feel welcome, and make sure that they know that we will make every effort to be bilingual if we can't, and to respond to them and work with them in the language that they feel most comfortable.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. I can't see any of the hands up there. There we go. Just as I say that, Garrett puts his hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I wanted to come in more on that last point. I'm obviously the link governor for Welsh medium schools, but I also head the Welsh language unit for the neighbouring health board. So I've got a bit of knowledge around this area. And I think with anything around that sort of learning Welsh, it's very, very hard to quantify what level you're looking at, because people learn at different paces and people learn in a different way, and to try and sort of quantify that is nigh on impossible. Certainly from a health perspective, from our side, it's as Trevor said, it's showing that respect to the language, and that sort of just those sort of basic skills that show that you have an awareness that we're in a bilingual country and that you're giving it a go, even if it's the simplest things like Borada and Prananda make a huge difference. So yeah, I think trying to quantify a given level is only going to cause issues. It's more around the attitude towards the language and that sort of willingness to kind of learn at your own pace and to use what the skills that you've learned. Sorry, not entirely appropriate, but I just thought it was best to kind of chip in on that one.
Yeah, no, thank you for contributing. It's all useful, and we appreciate that. So thank you, Garrett.
The other thing I would suggest, Rhys, if you're interested, is maybe not immediately because of the circumstances, but later on in the year, I'd be happy to bring a report on our ACL learners, and that will give you some of the quantifiable data around levels of attainment and levels of progression, levels of enrollments. They're all really positive figures, so I'd be happy to do that in future.
Yeah, brilliant. That'd be really helpful, Trevor. Thank you for that. I don't think there's anything else from councillors this evening. So the only thing now is to note the annual delivery plan monitoring report. If anyone would like to second that.
I can second.
Thanks, Naomi. Great. Thank you to everyone for your attendance and participation this evening. It's good to see everyone again. And our next meeting will be on Thursday, October the 12th.